I'm going to do the first floor framing now, and the placing of the steel beams. Now, we know, say for example, this wall is carrying the loads from half of these floor joists. And when I say half of them, I mean half of the loads are being transferred over here. The other half of the loads are being transferred over here. Now, in order to carry the weight of the wall, all of the loads that are coming down on that wall, we either put a wall in the basement to transfer those loads to the footing, or what's more typical is that we put in steel beams to carry those loads, so we have a wider open space in the lower level. So let's take a look over here. My steel beam will be at the same elevation as the top of my basement wall, but I'm looking here and I'm saying, well, there's the brick ledge should be at the grade, and it's not. So I need to modify this stacked wall first of all. And how much do I need to reduce the size of that? I need to reduce the size of that by an inch and a half. So I'll click on this, edit the type, go over here, look at my preview, and this is the object that I need to reduce by an inch and a half. So right there, instead of being a foot, it should be 10.5 inches, 10.5 inches. And let's see what that does. That's going to change that stacked wall wherever it occurs throughout the model. And I'm going to just say okay to that. Might give me a problem later on as I'm going around. Well, let's see what happened here. So what happened was it changed the height of this, but I need to change the height of this wall now because it's an inch and a half too tall, because you can see that it projects down into there. So I'm going to take that inch and a half out of this wall. Let's see what happens when we do that. Edit the type. Let's look at the structure. And I'm going to take an inch and a, oh, that's because that's the variable. Well, okay. Then I'll have to add an inch and a half to the basement wall. So it'll be 11.5 inches. Revit did exactly what I told it to do. I was assuming the basement wall was the variable, but in fact, the garage stud wall was the variable. So when I modified this wall was the one that changed in order to satisfy that criteria, but this had been set at a standard height. So I have to change that. And let's see what happens now. Yep, look at that. Now my brick ledge is exactly at the grade, which is where I want it to be. So I think these tutorials are valuable not only to show how to do certain things in Revit, but also it's showing you the errors that I'm making, and their errors in assumption. As I have said repeatedly, Revit's going to do what you tell it to do, not what you thought you wanted it to do. And if Revit followed my rules exactly, I took an inch and a half out of here, I took an inch and a half out of this, and in order to satisfy the top and the bottom constraints, it had to change its variable by that inch and a half. And my assumption was that the basement wall was my variable, but this wall was the variable, so that's the wall that changed. Anyway, I want to put in a steel beam now, and I know where it is relative to the sections, but I'm going to copy this guy. That's the grade. So I'm going to copy one of the levels. So I'll just copy this level, and I'm going to copy it down from here down to here, and I'm going to rename it. I'm going to rename that level top of steel beam. So instead of level 15, I could scroll out and click on it on the side and change it, but I'll just change it right here. So caps are always good. TO steel beam. So now I have a level that I can assign my steel beams to. And you can draw in any view and put objects into your model. So I'm going to draw on the first floor plan, but when I set the constraints for my steel beam to the proper level, it will still put that object in at the proper level, even though I don't have it. I really can't see the steel beam right now. But what's important to me is I need to see the center line of my first floor walls, and this will work for me. So this is the wall I want to put a steel beam under because I know that I have those loads coming down. This is a bearing wall. So I'll come over to structure, and I will come over to beam. And now I don't want it to be a 2x4, I want it to be a steel beam. And I believe Revit gives us a steel beam. Of course, if this were a real project, we would calculate the loads to determine what size beam we wanted, but we have a steel beam and then we can use that. So I'm going to click here and I'm telling Revit that I want to put in a W-shaped steel beam, but it wants to know what the reference level is, and I'm going to say top of steel beam. And now I can come over here and snap to the middle of the wall and come all the way down to here because that's the end of my bearing wall. It's telling me I can't see it in this view, which is fine because I didn't expect to be able to. And now I also know that that's a bearing wall, so I'm going to put a steel beam in there as well. It's still going to be top of steel beam, and I'll come over here and all the way over to here. And that warning is telling me, oh, you can't see it in this view, and that's fine. All right, let's see now. We want to go over here because that's a bearing wall as well. This happens to be the basement wall across here, so that steel beam will start here at the center line of that wall and go over to here. Okay, can't see it, that's all right. And now this is a bearing wall, this is outside wall, so that we don't need a steel beam underneath it, but here we do. So I'm going to put that steel beam in from here all the way over to there. So the steel beam rests on the basement wall, and what they do is they actually put what's called a beam pocket in the top of the basement wall to allow us to actually put our steel beam in there. So let's zoom out. I'm looking to see a section through my house that shows me, well, look at what I did here. I made this huge section all the way across here. I don't know why I would do that, but apparently I did, and I don't need to go all the way over there. I'm gonna drag this guy back some more and back some more. All right, so there's my side-to-side section, and I'm going to move it back to where I know I put a steel beam in, which is right under there. And now let's take a look at that steel beam. So that didn't work. This beam had put the work plane in at the first floor. So that means I have to drop it down now. I'm not sure why that didn't work as I wanted it to, but all right, so it didn't. So now our first floor is our reference plane, and it's not letting me change that. Maybe if I edit the type, I can change the reference plane. This is all the information about it, but it's not letting me change the reference plane. So error on my part, but I know I can just change the elevation relative to the first floor. It's 1 foot, 1.5 inches. So I'll click on this beam and I'm going to change the start level offset. What do we say? 1 foot, 1.5. So I'll go minus 1 foot, 1.5. And I'll do the same thing here. Minus 1 foot, 1.5. And watch what happens. Now see how it dropped it down to where I wanted it to be? Now steel beam has two sides, two ends. So if I only change one end, then it would be on an angle. I have to change both ends, the start level offset and the end level offset in order for that beam to work properly. So I'm going to copy this, Control C, and I need to go and look at where other places where I put that steel beam, because it's probably in the wrong spot too. So I know I have a steel beam underneath here. Let's take a look at that now. Sure enough, it went in at the first floor. So I have to change it. So I'll come over here, Control V and Control V. That just saves me a little bit of time of typing, and apply it. So now the steel beam is in the right spot. And I put a beam under here. I think I changed that one. I did. I put a beam under here. I think I changed that one, and I did. And now I know I have some steel beam over here. So let's go to the other section, drag it over where I'm going to be able to see both of those steel beams. Go to the view. Here it is. Let's look at our steel beams there. Yeah, look at that. Wrong one. So there's one over here too. I'll hit the Control key, click on that, and I can change the values of the constraints of both of those at the same time. And say OK. So now my steel beams are in the right location. Now, when I think this is a good place to stop. We're going to start putting in framing next.